There are moments in life when the silence of someone who once mattered deeply feels heavier than 1,000 spoken words. You sense they still think of you. Maybe you feel it in your gut, in a dream, or in the way certain songs suddenly make sense. And yet they don't call, they don't show up. The mind tries to reason with the absence, but the heart aches under the weight of it. We assume their distance means disinterest, that if they truly cared, they'd reach out. But the truth is far more complex and often far more human. According to Carl Jung, human behavior is not always led by logic or conscious intent. Beneath the surface of our everyday actions lie ancient emotions, unconscious fears, and unresolved wounds. So when someone misses you but doesn't reach out, it may not be because they don't feel anything. In fact, it may be because they feel too much. You may awaken something in them they don't know how to face. Love is never just about longing, it's about emotional capacity. And some people, no matter how intense their emotions, simply don't have the inner strength yet to meet you where you are. Sometimes your presence touches something too tender in another person. You remind them of what they have spent years trying to forget: vulnerability, closeness, trust. Maybe you were the first to see them without their armor. Maybe you offered a kind of love that felt safe, raw, and real. And that very safety became terrifying because it demanded that they put their guard down. For someone who hasn't healed, that kind of intimacy feels more like a threat than a gift. Their silence, then, is not rejection, it's resistance. Not to you, but to the emotional transformation your presence demands of them. In the face of that, their instinct is to retreat, not because they don't care, but because they are overwhelmed by what caring would require of them. Their unconscious may be telling them, "You're not ready to be seen." And so they pull away not with cruelty, but with confusion, fear, and self-preservation. This is where your own awareness matters most, because it's easy to take their silence personally, to let it echo through your sense of worth. But what if their silence isn't about your inadequacy, but about their inner war? What if you're not being ignored, but reflected in a mirror they aren't ready to look into? Understanding this doesn't make the pain go away, but it does offer clarity, and with clarity comes peace. You are not the cause of their emotional retreat. You are the reminder of what they must face within themselves. And sometimes that is simply too much for them to bear. So when you don't hear from someone who once felt so close, don't rush to question your value. Instead, remember, this silence is not always the absence of love. Sometimes it is the presence of fear. And fear doesn't mean they don't care. It means they're not ready. Not for you, not yet, maybe not ever. But that doesn't mean you have to wait. Your worth doesn't need proof. Your love doesn't need permission. Let their silence be their journey, and let your healing be your own. There's something profoundly mysterious about the way one person can enter another's life and awaken a storm of emotions. Emotions buried so deeply, even they don't understand where they come from. You may not have said or done anything extraordinary. You simply showed up as yourself, honest, loving, emotionally present. But without realizing it, your presence became a mirror, and for them that mirror reflected something terrifying, the parts of themselves they've long kept in the shadows. Carl Jung called this hidden part of the psyche, the shadow, everything we've suppressed, rejected, or denied within ourselves. Most people aren't even aware they carry it, but it influences their choices, their fears, their reactions. And when someone comes along who sees them, not just the version They present to the world, but the version they try to hide, they're no longer in control. They panic, they pull away. Not because you're too much, but because they're not ready to be that exposed. This is what makes emotional intimacy so confronting. You didn't just stir up their desire, you stirred up their pain. Maybe your kindness reminded them of a tenderness they were taught to fear. Maybe your emotional availability triggered their memory of being abandoned or hurt. When love enters a heart that was trained to guard itself, that love can feel like a threat. It challenges the very identity they've built on survival, and their first instinct is not to lean in, but to retreat. They might tell themselves, "You're too intense or too different," but beneath those rationalizations lies something far more fragile, the fear of being truly seen, of being known in all their complexity, both the light and the brokenness. For someone who's spent years keeping their emotions under control, that kind of transparency can feel like losing power, losing safety. You didn't create their fear, you just happened to trigger it. And that for them is enough to run. This is the paradox of deep emotional connection. The more real it is, the more it confronts. You may have thought your love would heal them, save them, or invite them to grow. But healing can't be forced. Growth can't be rushed. And sometimes the love you offer, though pure, is received as pressure by a soul that isn't yet open. So when someone pulls away without explanation, understand that you may have touched something sacred in them, their pain, not because you hurt them, but because you brought it to the surface. And some people would rather live numb than feel again, would rather walk away than face their own inner chaos. It's painful to witness, especially when you know you offered only a softness, only sincerity. But don't confuse their reaction with your worth. Their response doesn't reflect your value, it reflects their unresolved story, the one that we're still too afraid to read. And here lies your power to release them with grace, without needing closure that may never come. To trust that you didn't fail, you simply arrived at a chapter they weren't ready to open. What they saw in you was beautiful, but beauty too can be unbearable when it shines light on everything we've buried. So don't dim your light just because someone flinched when it touched their darkness. Keep shining, keep loving, not to convince them to return, but to stay true to who you are, because the right person won't fear the mirror you hold. They'll look into it with gratitude and see themselves more clearly because of you. We often imagine love as a soft, welcoming force, something that soothes us, fills the emptiness, and makes life sweeter. But the truth is, real love doesn't just comfort. Sometimes it shakes us to the core. It awakens what's been asleep, forgotten, or intentionally buried. And not everyone is ready for that kind of awakening. Carl Jung believed that love isn't just an emotion. It's a mirror that reflects everything we've hidden from ourselves. When someone gets close enough to touch your soul, they don't just see your beauty, they stir your shadows, the parts of you that have gone unhealed, the pain you've learned to live around, the fears you've convinced yourself are behind you. That's the real power of love. It doesn't ask for your surface, it calls for your wholeness. For someone who's lived behind emotional walls, who has survived heartbreak or abandonment, this kind of closeness can feel terrifying. Maybe they told themselves they were ready for connection. Maybe they even reached for you in moments of clarity. But the moment you stepped in too close, too lovingly, too honestly, you awakened something in them they didn't want to feel again. Love has a way of pulling the hidden to the surface. It challenges the mask, invites vulnerability, and exposes the unfinished emotional business that we thought we could avoid. Suddenly, they're not just falling for you, they're falling into memories, into fears, into the echo of old wounds that never got closure. They may not understand what's happening. All they know is that their emotional defenses are cracking. And so they pull away, not because they don't feel love, but because love makes them feel everything. This is where the emotional split occurs. Their heart wants to come closer, but their past, unhealed and unresolved, screams for distance. Their soul may be craving intimacy, but their nervous system still associates closeness with danger. The result is confusion, inconsistency, and retreat. And if you don't understand this dynamic, it's easy to blame yourself, to think you were too much, that your love somehow drove them away. But the truth is, your love didn't hurt them, it illuminated their hurt. You became a catalyst for healing they weren't ready to face. And that's not your fault. It's simply the nature of conscious connection. You offered something rare: presence, tenderness, emotional safety. But those gifts only feel safe to someone who has healed enough to receive them. Jung taught that the path to individuation, the journey of becoming whole, requires facing what's broken, not just embracing what's beautiful. And for many, the presence of real love is the first time they feel the invitation to begin that path. But it's a difficult journey, and not everyone is ready to walk it, especially not with someone else beside them. So if you find yourself loving someone who pulls away just as things get real, understand that this is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of depth. Your connection touched a sacred wound. And while that may have scared them, it doesn't make your love any less true. It makes it more powerful. Don't regret being the one who awakened something within them. One day, maybe they'll thank you. But even if they don't, you'll know you loved from truth, from wholeness. And that matters. Because love, real love, isn't just about holding hands. Sometimes it's about holding a mirror and trusting that your reflection was exactly what their soul needed to see, even if they had to turn away. There's a quiet kind of heartbreak that happens when someone you care for drifts into silence. No closure, no goodbye, just distance where closeness used to live. And in that silence, your mind begins to fill in the blanks. Was I not enough? Did I do something wrong? You start to question your worth as if someone else's emotional withdrawal holds the authority to define your value. But this is the illusion that Carl Jung warned us about: the dangerous tendency to let other people's behaviors mirror back our unresolved wounds. The truth is, someone else's silence is rarely a reflection of you. It's a reflection of their inner world, their fears, their unhealed pain, their emotional limitations. But when we don't understand this, we internalize their absence as evidence that we're unworthy of love. And that false belief plants itself deep in our psyche, quietly shaping the way we see ourselves. It's important to remember that people don't leave only when things go wrong. Sometimes they leave when things begin to feel too right. When emotional safety becomes unfamiliar, when being seen stirs up parts of themselves they're not ready to acknowledge. Your presence, your care, your vulnerability, it might have brought them to the edge of their own shadow. And instead of stepping into that unknown, they ran. Not because you lacked value, but because they lacked readiness. When someone disappears without explanation, their silence can feel deafening. But the danger lies in using that silence as a measuring stick for your self-worth. You are not defined by the choices someone else makes from a place of fear or confusion. You're not made smaller by someone's inability to meet you where you are. Jung reminds us that we project our inner wounds onto the outer world. So if their absence causes you deep self-doubt, it's worth asking, what wound is this touching in me? Why does their silence echo louder than my own inner voice? This is where healing begins, not by decoding their silence, but by confronting the parts of yourself that believed you needed their approval in the first place. You are not here to audition for love. You are not meant to perform for someone to stay. The value you bring to this world doesn't vanish because one person couldn't receive it. Their retreat is not your rejection. It's their resistance to closeness, to growth, to their own healing. And that resistance has nothing to do with your beauty, your intelligence, your soul. When the someone leaves quietly, you may never get the answers your heart longs for. But you can choose not to turn that silence inward. You can decide that your story will not be written by someone else's fear. You can make peace with the unknown, and in doing so, reclaim your voice, your center, your sense of self. You don't have to wait for someone to validate your value. You don't have to beg for a love that should have met you freely, fully. Let their silence speak only of their journey, not of your worth. Because real worth is unwavering. It does not tremble in the face of rejection. It does not shrink when someone turns away. It remains. So if you're facing silence right now, don't collapse into it. Rise from it. Let it be the space where you remember who you are, what you deserve, and why you don't need anyone's words to confirm your place in this world. You're already enough, and no one's absence can ever change that. There comes a moment in every heartbroken silence when the pain becomes too familiar, too repetitive to ignore. You've reread the last message. You've replayed the last conversation. You've asked yourself 1,000 questions, none of which bring peace. And then quietly beneath the noise of longing, something shifts. A voice not loud, but unmistakably yours whispers, "Come back, come home to yourself." This is that moment, the sacred, often painful invitation to return to who you are beneath the ache. Because as much as it hurts when someone distances themselves from you, the deeper heartbreak lies in how easily we abandon ourselves in the process. We wait, we chase, we analyze, we forget that the most important relationship, the one that sets the tone for every other, has always been the one we hold with ourselves. Carl Jung taught that the outer world is often a reflection of our inner state. So when we seek love in someone who cannot offer it, when we long for closeness with someone who keeps pulling away, it's not just about them. It's about the part of us that still believes we must earn love to be worthy of it. That voice, quiet but powerful, tells us to be patient, to hold on, to prove ourselves. But real love doesn't ask you to prove anything. Real love meets you. And when it doesn't, it's time to meet yourself again. This is not a punishment. It's a calling, a sacred threshold where the universe, in its strange and often painful wisdom, says, "Enough. You've searched long enough outside of yourself. Now look inward. Now come home." That home isn't built from their affection or attention. It's built from self-respect, from a truth, from the radical decision to no longer chase what hurts. You don't need to wait by the phone rereading signs, interpreting silence like a scripture. What you need is to listen to the part of you that is tired of waiting to be chosen. That part of you is ready to stop shrinking for someone else's comfort, ready to be whole even in the absence of what you thought you needed. When someone pulls away, let that space become sacred. Let it be where you plant new boundaries, rediscover old dreams, and reclaim the pieces of yourself you gave away, hoping to be loved. This is where the healing begins, not by dragging someone back into your life, but by remembering you never needed them to complete you. You needed them to show you where you had forgotten yourself. And so, if you find yourself in the ache of someone's absence, don't rush to fill the void. Let it speak. Let it teach you. What is it showing you about your own capacity to love, to give, to stay present even for yourself? Because that's the turning point, the moment when pain no longer defines you, but refines you. When the longing becomes less about them and more about reconnecting with the powerful, whole, luminous version of yourself that never left. In returning to yourself, you don't lose love, you find it. A deeper love, a clearer love, the kind that doesn't ask for approval, that doesn't beg for attention, the kind that simply is. So when their silence lingers, let it echo long enough to bring you back not to them, but to the place you always belonged. You, whole, worthy, already enough. There comes a time in your emotional journey when you realize something life-changing, something you may have overlooked for years. You don't need to be chosen by anyone else to feel whole. You only need to choose yourself. It sounds simple, almost cliché, but in practice, this is one of the most radical acts of self-love. Because for so long, we've been conditioned to measure our worth by someone else's willingness to stay. We were taught, often unconsciously, that love must be earned, that our value depends on whether we're wanted, remembered, pursued. But what if it doesn't? What if all the waiting, all the hoping, all the yearning was never about the other person, but about something inside us begging to be claimed? Carl Jung believed that wholeness comes not through external validation, but through inner integration. And the most powerful moment of transformation happens when you stop asking, why won't they choose me, and begin asking, why haven't I fully chosen myself? This isn't about arrogance. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about grounding yourself in the truth that you were never broken, never too much, never unworthy. It's about reclaiming your own heart, your own time, your own energy from people who couldn't meet you in your fullness. When someone withdraws, even if they feel something for you, and you respond by shrinking, second-guessing, or proving you're handing over your power, but when you choose yourself instead, you send a message to the universe, I am enough. I don't chase, I align. I don't beg, I become. Choosing yourself means setting boundaries that protect your peace. It means walking away from emotional ambiguity. It means learning that someone else's inability to love you properly has nothing to do with your capacity to be loved. You may have been ready, you may have shown up with your heart open, but if they couldn't meet you there, that's not rejection. That's redirection back to you, to your light, to your wholeness. And when you begin to choose yourself not as a reaction, but as a way of life, you no longer collapse in the face of someone's silence. You no longer wait for closure to move forward. You no longer search for your reflection in the eyes of someone who cannot see you clearly. You begin to radiate differently. You begin to attract differently, not from lack or need, but from abundance. Because wholeness isn't loud or flashy, it's quiet confidence. It's the peace of knowing you're already enough, even if no one claps for you, even if no one calls you back, even if the love you gave is never returned. Choosing yourself is the beginning of a sacred alignment. It's when healing begins to take root, not because someone came to save you, but because you saved yourself. And from that place, you will never again beg for crumbs. You will never again settle for potential. You will never again twist yourself into versions you were never meant to be just to feel loved. Because now you've chosen yourself, fully, finally, fiercely. And that choice is where your power lives. That choice is where real love begins. Not the kind that takes from you, but the kind that meets you where you are. The kind that reflects back your wholeness, not your wounds. So if no one else chooses you today, let it be okay, because you did. And that changes everything. Absence hurts. There's no way to soften that truth. When someone who once felt close suddenly pulls away, the silence they leave behind isn't just quiet, it's deafening. It echoes through your mind, your body, your sense of worth. You wonder what went wrong, what you missed, what you could have done differently. But somewhere deeper beneath the noise of self-blame lies a hidden opportunity, an invitation that pain, as brutal as it feels, has come to deliver. Because while absence wounds, it also transforms. Carl Jung believed that growth doesn't happen in the light alone, it happens when we face our shadows. And one of the most revealing shadows we ever confront is the emptiness left behind when someone we love becomes emotionally or physically unavailable. That space, though painful, is sacred because it forces us to sit with our own inner terrain, the parts of ourselves that once relied on someone else's presence to feel whole. It's tempting to fill the void, to reach out, to plead, to rationalize their silence into something you can accept. But what if you didn't fill it? What if you simply allowed it to exist? What if you leaned into the ache and asked, what is this trying to show me about myself? Because that's where the real work begins, not in trying to get them back, but in trying to get yourself back. When someone disappears, they often take more than just their presence. They take the version of you that felt seen through their eyes. And that loss can be disorienting. But Jung reminds us our sense of self must come from within, not from how someone else perceives or responds to us. So instead of asking why they're gone, ask why their absence feels so unbearable. What need were they fulfilling that you haven't yet learned to meet on your own? What part of you believed they were the answer to something broken inside of you? These questions are not meant to blame, but to awaken. Because once you recognize what their presence gave you, you can begin the sacred work of giving it to yourself. The pain of absence is a teacher in disguise. It teaches you to self-soothe, to hold your own heart with gentleness, to build an inner sanctuary so steady that no one else's departure can shake your foundation. It teaches you how to sit in discomfort without abandoning yourself, how to stay emotionally present even when others are not. This is not about becoming hard or indifferent, it's about becoming whole. When someone leaves, they may close a door you desperately wanted to walk through, but in doing so, they open another, the one that leads back to you. And when you walk through that door, everything begins to shift. You stop looking backward. You stop needing explanations. You begin to honor your process, your timing, your truth. And in that honoring, something extraordinary happens. The pain starts to transform. The absence becomes spaciousness. The longing becomes clarity. You realize you didn't lose yourself. When they left, you found the parts of yourself that were waiting to be reclaimed. So if you're sitting in that silence now, aching for what once was, know this, you are not being punished. You are being shaped, strengthened. initiated into a deeper version of yourself. And this pain, though sharp, is carving space for something richer, truer, and more aligned. In the end, it's not about who left, it's about who you become in their absence. Let that be the focus. Let that be the gift. There's a moment somewhere between holding on and letting go where you stop asking if they'll ever come back and start wondering why you were waiting in the first place. That moment is not weakness. It is awakening, because you are not here to wait. You are here to evolve. We're taught to believe that love means loyalty, that devotion means endurance, that if we just hold on a little longer, the person who pulled away might turn around. But that belief often keeps us emotionally stuck, rooted in a version of ourselves that revolves around another person's availability. Carl Jung would say that's not love. That's attachment disguised as virtue. And attachment, when rooted in fear and longing, becomes a prison of our own making. You were not born to wait at the edge of someone's indecision. You were not placed on this earth to be an emotional placeholder while someone else sorts out their wounds. If someone walks away, let them walk. Not out of a spite, not out of pride, but out of reverence for your own growth. Because waiting for someone who is not emotionally present delays the sacred work that's trying to happen within you. Every time you pause your life for someone who's unsure about you, you abandon a part of yourself. You silence your voice. You postpone your healing. And slowly you begin to forget who you were before the waiting began. But you can reclaim that voice. You can begin again, not when they return, but now. Jung believed that the path of individuation, the journey to becoming whole, is not about clinging to what is uncertain, but about integrating the parts of ourselves that have been neglected. And sometimes the most neglected part is the one who kept hoping for someone else's love to make her feel enough. So what if, instead of waiting, you evolved? What if you turned that longing into presence? What if you used that silence to learn the sound of your own truth again? Because transformation doesn't begin with someone else choosing you. It begins with you choosing yourself fully, without conditions, without delay. Waiting robs you of momentum. Evolving returns it. It puts your life back in your hands. It reminds you that you don't have to put your joy on hold. You don't have to postpone your becoming. Your healing does not have to wait for their apology, their return, or their closure. You are allowed to rise now. And as you do, you'll realize something powerful. The person you've been waiting for might never come back, not because you weren't enough, but because your evolution required their absence. Because the version of you that's emerging is too expansive to be tethered to someone who couldn't see your light. You're not meant to chase. You're meant to choose. And the greatest choice you can make is to keep growing even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because that pain, that emptiness, it's not here to break you. It's here to rebuild you into someone who no longer waits to be seen, but who sees herself so clearly she becomes magnetic to everything aligned with her soul. So don't wait. Evolve. The next chapter of your life isn't found in their return. It's found in your rising, not because they came back, but because you did. Sometimes the most powerful growth happens not when love enters our lives, but when it leaves, and we're left alone with the silence. In those moments, we're tempted to believe that someone else's absence is a reflection of our worth, but it's not. Their silence is about them, their fears, their unresolved wounds, not about your value. The deeper truth is this: you are not here to wait to beg or to prove. You are here to evolve. Carl Jung taught that emotional pain often reveals what we haven't yet integrated within ourselves. So when someone pulls away and we feel destabilized, it's an invitation to ask, what part of me still depends on another's love to feel whole? That question, while uncomfortable, can be the doorway to profound transformation. Choosing yourself doesn't mean closing your heart. It means recognizing that your wholeness isn't dependent on who stays or leaves. It's about reclaiming your energy, your time, and your self-worth from situations that no longer honor you. Waiting keeps you stuck, but choosing to grow despite the heartbreak opens you to a life where love is not earned but shared. So if you're facing a painful absence right now, let it be the beginning of your return to yourself. Use the silence to build a strength. Use the space to reconnect with who you are beyond the relationship. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means expanding. And one day, without even looking, you'll attract someone who sees you not through the lens of fear, but with clarity, respect, and readiness. Until then, let the work begin not on them, but within you, because the love you give yourself sets the standard for every love that follows.